Do you like freedom? Are you a fan of human rights? Well, those were all rhetorical questions. You're not allowed to think. Today we're going to be talking about some of the most ruthless leaders in history. This is going to be a brief look into a couple of ruthless leaders, how they garnered their power, and what they did to get themselves on this list. And unless the educational system failed you, you should know some of these guys. But hopefully there's going to be some in here that you don't know about. Before fully jumping into it, if you're new here, welcome, and if you're returning, it's good to see you again. All of the leaders in this video are going to be listed in the description below, so if you already know all of these leaders, then you can go ahead and just skip this video, unless you want to keep watching because I'm cute. Oh, whoa! Okay, time to talk about some shitheads. Adolf Hitler. That's right, baby, we're starting off hot. On November 11th, 1918, an armistice was signed between Germany and the Allies, ending the First World War. Little did the Earth know, a little birdie would begin his rise to power that would leave a haunting mark on history and would ruin a facial hairstyle for every man to come. Hitler's rise to power can be traced back to 1919, when he had joined the German Working Party, which would later become the Nazi Party. And with that, he would become the leader of the Workers' Party. He would then later gain notoriety in Germany by exploiting unrest during the Great Depression. And through shady maneuvers, such as propaganda and smearing, he would be appointed Chancellor in 1933. Now these shady maneuvers also included things like arson, and after the Reichstag fire, a parliament building in Berlin, burnt down by the Nazi Party, would lead to the establishment of the Nazi dictatorship. Later on in 1933, on March 23rd, the Enabling Act would give Hitler full power. So that was just a brief recap on how Hitler became the leader in Germany and the Nazi Party. Now the reason we're talking about this asshole is the horrendous acts Adolf Hitler would do in World War II, particularly his treatment to the Jewish people. Now that's not to say Hitler wasn't the only one committing war crimes. Unit 731 in Japan was giving people frostbite, and the Soviet Union was murdering their own protesters in mass. Mass being roughly 30,000 people in a couple of days. But Hitler's drive to carry out plans of genocide stand out because of how many people he was able to murder. Around 6 million Jewish people would be killed because of Hitler's quote, final solution, in which he called for the eradication of Jewish people, and other quote, undesirables. These quote, undesirables included groups like black people living in Germany, people accused of disobedience, gay and bisexual people, as well as those accused of it, people with disabilities, Romas, Poles, Soviet Union POWs, and pretty much anyone who didn't align with the Nazi Party. Nonetheless, Germany saw the Jewish people as their #1 enemy, and as such would put them in all different types of camps, where they would be forced to work, with barely any supplies like food or medical equipment. I only say barely because some places had like one piece of bread that they would give out, and the treatment there can be compared to the likes of hell. There were many different types of camps. The most well-known ones are the concentration camps, like Auschwitz. The Nazi Party and the collaborators would systematically murder Jewish people, mainly by mass shootings or by the gas chambers. The name of the genocide of the Jewish people during World War II is the Holocaust. And in historical context, when looking at right or wrong in history, this is the one time in history where we can look at something and be like, yep, we can tell who is good and who's the bad guys. And many people reference the Nazi Party because they were so obviously bad. And now time to jump to another genocidal leader, with Pol Pot. Saloth Sar, commonly known as Pol Pot, began to gain power and eventually would become Prime Minister of Cambodia when he first joined the Khmer Rouge, sometime in the early 1950s, a pro-communist revolutionary party. There he would rise within the rankings of the party, later reorganizing it in 1960, adopting the Marxism-Leninism ideology. The purpose of Marxism-Leninism is to turn a capitalist state into a socialist state, by means of revolution. Now that is a huge oversimplification of that, but for Pol Pot and this video, that's what you'll need to know. Pol Pot would eventually emerge as the Cambodian party chief, and with this power, as well as the party's ideology, the Khmer Rouge launched a national uprising in 1968. So for right now, Pol Pot is a leader of a huge group of people who believe they are fighting for the right side. Now at the same time, the official leader of Cambodia was Prince Norodom Sihanouk, and while he showed neutrality in his politics, he was much more on the communist side. And he would later back the Khmer Rouge when he was ousted in a coup. And that coup takes us to Pol Pot's enemy. General Lon Nol initiated a coup in 1970 and will be successful in overthrowing the leader of Cambodia. The reason the coup was initiated is it is believed that Prince Norodom allowed war to seep into Cambodia. And General Lon Nol, as well as many other people, were not fans of that. General Lon Nol was the leader of Forces Armées Nationales, Khmer, otherwise known as FANK. FANK, led by Lon Nol, and the Khmer Rouge, led by Pol Pot, would ignite in a civil war for power. And fun fact, the USA would support Lon Nol. Not saying like, hey, you got this, good luck out there, but like with bombs.
Airstrikes. Bomb them. Bomb them. Keep bombing them.
Roughly 500,000 tons of bombs were dropped in Cambodia, as well as sending in US soldiers. This conflict would result in the deaths of roughly 10% of Cambodia's 7 million people. That's roughly 700,000 people. Again, roughly. This civil war would last for 5 years, and at the end the Khmer Rouge would come out victorious. Now with the Khmer Rouge in power, the citizens of Cambodia would face many new strict policies, like money, private property, jewelry, gambling. Most reading material and religious material were outlawed. Agriculture was collectivized, children were taken from their homes and forced into the military, and strict rules governing sexual relations, vocabulary, and clothing were laid down. And while stripping people's rights is definitely a way to get on the inhumane list, and 5 years of brutal war aren't the only reasons Pol Pot is considered one of the most brutal leaders of all time. That would be because of the Cambodia genocide, which lasted from 1975 to 1979. And would see the deaths of roughly 1.5 to 2 million people, almost 25% of Cambodia's population. The genocide occurred after the civil war between the Fangs and the Khmer Rouge, in which the Khmer Rouge was victorious. Pol Pot would be the person responsible for the systematic prosecution and killings of Cambodian citizens. The capital of Cambodia, Phnom Penh, was taken by Khmer Rouge at the end of the civil war. In the capital is where citizens were placed, and would be put to work in fields. And if any of them were disobedient in any single way, they would be tortured and almost always killed, usually being taken to interrogation rooms. An example of this is prison S21, where it is reported that 20,000 Cambodians went in and only 13 people came out.
These murals stand as memorials to the dead.
After the Cambodian Civil War, the Khmer Rouge believed that the Cambodian citizens were highly influenced by outside powers, as the USA as well as Vietnam supported the Fangs, the group opposed to the Khmer Rouge. So millions upon millions would be slain. And it wasn't just those specific people that were believed to be against the Khmer Rouge, but rather their entire families that would be tortured and killed. And like most genocides, the Khmer Rouge also targeted ethnic minorities, especially Chinese, Vietnamese, and Muslim Cham, of whom an estimated 80% were killed. In addition, doctors, lawyers, teachers, people with glasses, if they thought you were smart, you were dead. And especially in places close to the Vietnamese border. Killing fields and mass graves would encompass Cambodia. And it wouldn't be until 1978 when Vietnam forces made their way into Cambodia to remove the Khmer Rouge, would changes finally occur. And while the Vietnam power would eventually force Pol Pot to retreat, officially ending the Cambodian genocide, clashes between Vietnam soldiers and Cambodian citizens and soldiers would continue for roughly a decade.
It is clear, however, that his health is failing fast. But if intimations of mortality, his own mortality, have given him any second thoughts about what he did to his countrymen, he's not letting on. Perhaps they'll be there to greet him on the other side of that bourne from which no traveller returns.
Idi Amin, aka the Butcher of Uganda. So you know this is going to be bad. The chief of army who had once promised peace to the people of Uganda would only bring violence and the deaths of an estimated 500,000 people. Following Uganda's independence from the United Kingdom, a country becoming independent from the UK? I've never heard of that before. That was a joke. Joke's supposed to be funny. Fuck you. Amin was promoted to captain in 1962, later to major in 1963. Amin was a soldier all his life and lived through the military. In 1962, he was promoted to captain, later in 1963 to major, then deputy commander, then to commander of the army in 1964. In 1970, he was promoted to commander of all armed forces, which, hey, don't ever do that. For any, people who own a country, just don't give one guy all the military power. That won't go well. And as we'll see, in 1971, in a coup, Idi Amin would take power over Milton Obote. This was due to Amin learning that Obote had planned to arrest him for misappropriating army funds, which is a huge foreshadow for what will happen with Amin's reign. But also, Obote took control of the armed forces, reducing Amin's power months prior to the coup. so you can see why Amin was pretty pissed off about this. With the assistance of Israeli government agents, while Obote was out of the country, Amin and his followers would take control of the Entebbe International Airport, cutting off Obete from returning back, as well as having soldiers surrounding Obete's residence, plus broadcasting accusations of Obete being more favorable towards the Lango region. This coup, plus the radio broadcast, convinced many people. What motivated people even more was the fact that Amin presented himself as a soldier, rather than a politician. And he was promising that the military would take over and hold the power until the new election would happen. Now, just to spell that out, that's an enormous promise for one person to fulfill. And Amin did not do so. In fact, 1 week later, he would declare himself president of Uganda. As for Idi Amin's atrocities that make him such a ruthless leader, well, it was highly motivated by paranoia, like many of these other horrible leaders. In an attempt to regain Uganda, Ugandan exiles who had sided with former President Obote would attempt an invasion in 1972. In response, Amin would target all Obote's supporters, predominantly those from the Alkali and Lango ethnic groups, who Amin began to massacre. But people weren't catching on just yet. All many citizens knew were people were disappearing en masse. But these two groups weren't the only two groups targeted by Amin's army. Other ethnic groups, religious leaders, journalists, artists, senior bureaucrats, judges, lawyers, students, suspected criminals, and foreign nationals, pretty much anyone who can challenge a dictator, would be killed. During this time is when it became apparent that Amin's promises of making Uganda a peaceful place would not be fulfilled. As while Amin was committing atrocities with his army every day, normal crime rates spiked through the roof. It is reported that people would just kill people just for the fuck of it. Notoriously, mass amounts of bodies would be dumped into the Nile. And all this violence made sense when you look at Amin's army. He stacked his soldiers full of mercenaries. And Amin had promised a military type control over Uganda, but that was just used to put soldiers in government positions. But the main thing that stands out about Amin's brutality, it is reported that Amin had an extremely bizarre behavior, such as tasting blood, and reportedly claiming that he himself ate another person. On top of that, Amin would make underground prisons with torture chambers and an electrified moat. Like underground. This is crazy, by the way. And I haven't even mentioned the economic plunge that he would put Uganda in. Mainly due to his decree ordering the expulsion of 50,000 Asians who were British passport holders. Later going on to include roughly all Asians who were not Ugandan citizens. This being roughly 60,000 people. As you can tell, he was not a fan of Asian people. And likewise, he would cut ties with Asian and European businesses. His hatred would cut off his own country's wealth, murdering his own innocent citizens, and trying to completely squash the education system. Torture, executions, all this happened under his 8-year rule. And the exact number of people killed is unknown. Experts have said that the death toll is no fewer than 80,000, and more likely 300,000, but accounts from survivors say that the number is much more likely to be around 500,000 people murdered. While Idi Amin didn't kill as many people as Pol Pot or Adolf Hitler, his personal brutality and genuine lack of care for his own people puts him on this list.
And immediately they hear anybody making subversive activities or try to plan anything against me, they report that person straight to the police.
Because other brutal leaders at least care for a certain group of people. Amin would take out his anger and brutality on people close to him. There were a couple of his close partners who fled to the UK in fear for their lives because Amin had lashed out on him. So yeah, total piece of shit. Rest in piss. Matter of fact, rest in smelly piss. That goes for everyone else on this list too, but yeah, whatever.
Gaius Caesar Germanicus.
I swear I tried saying that, I can't do it. AKA Caligula.
Take 7 steps back!
Roman emperor from 37 AD to 41 AD. Caligula wasn't actually a fan of the name he would be recognized as, given to him by soldiers. Now reports are conflicted here. Either he was given this nickname when he was a young boy who would follow his father on military campaigns and would dress up as a soldier, while other reports say that his mother gave him a soldier's outfit and made him wear it to appease the soldiers, and then the soldiers gave him the nickname Caligula. So to me, the soldiers either thought this kid was cute and wanted to give him a little nickname, or they were mocking this leader who dressed up like them. But looking at context, I believe the soldiers actually adored him, at least in the beginning. Unlike a lot of other ruthless leaders in history, Caligula was actually loved by all of his people at the beginning of his reign. Caligula would throw free gladiator games. That's like the NFL airing games for free, Or the UFC just showing a fight on like TikTok live for free, and you don't gotta watch it on someone else's like stream and they keep talking the whole time and you really want them to shut up because you're trying to watch the fight, but they won't stop talking about anything other. Remember, there wasn't shit to do back in the day. So passing up on all that monopoly money is a big deal. Caligula was also bettering public works, such as buildings. It would only be later in his life when Caligula would prove to be on this list. Caligula began to be cruel towards the Senate and the population. Sources say Caligula began to grow increasingly erratic, corrupt, and tyrannical. Many scholars speculate by 39 AD, Caligula was suffering from mental illness as he allegedly began to consider himself a god. Imagine Kanye but with actual power. That's right, get mad.
La 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 la, wait till I get my money right.
Also, according to Cassius Dio, Caligula threatened to make his horse a consul, which was the highest elected public official of the Roman Republic. A horse.
It's too much pressure.
And apparently he had ordered the sun to rise at night. So something might have been off. Oh, what's that? We're talking about the Roman Emperor and you didn't think we'd talk about incest? Caligula had a crazy incestual relationship with his sister.
Sisters, the three most beautiful women in all of Rome.
Zoinks! Zoinks! Zoinks!
I had to read that so you had to hear it. But back to talking about Caligula and him thinking he's God. I am not a religious man, but whenever another man says that he is God and proclaims himself as such, that is not a good thing.
I am God!
And a quote that perfectly encompasses the way Caligula was feeling is, quote, "Remember that I have the right to do anything to anybody." Always good to hear from your leader. Other stories include an animal sacrifice gone wrong. Well, right to Caligula. As he would have a hammer and raise it up, and instead of going down and hitting an animal, he would instead swing it to the side and hit a priest in the head and killing him. I shouldn't laugh, but I can't imagine what the audience was like. Because you just saw your leader just cave in a priest's head. And supposedly, Caligula was maniacally laughing afterwards. So do you just go with it as the audience? Like I would. I'm not about to get my head smashed. Now, people around him weren't blind to, him falling off the ladder. But the thing is, Caligula, while going mad, also had paranoia and realized people around him were going to conspire against him. And paranoia plus a surplus amount of power is always a good thing. Caligula would begin throwing fake treasonous trials to execute those he had believed were conspiring against him. You know how I mentioned Caligula made his horse a consul? He eventually made his horse a priest. I would definitely do that with my dog. That is if he wasn't dead. While Caligula isn't known for his mass amounts of bodies he would rack up, in like the murder way, weirdos, his quick descent into madness is what puts him on this list. And he's highly known as the emperor who went mad.
Although I have taken the form of Caius Caligula, I am all men as I am no man, and therefore I am a god.
Now if you know anything about Roman history, you know they love a good stabbing and a good conspiracy.
Pizza, pizza.
And gosh darn it, we're gonna get one. In 41 AD, Caligula and his family were assassinated, as the conspiracy began between the Praetorian Guard and the Senate. So to all you out there, if you're feeling like you're a god, go to a doctor and don't have sex with your siblings. However, if you can make a horse a priest, do that. So those were a couple of brutal leaders in history. Did I miss a leader that you are fascinated about? Let me know in the comments below. And if you learned anything about these horrible people, let me know as well. If you enjoyed this video, a like really helps me out. And if I earned it, why not subscribe? Alright, bye.
Hello darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.